All right, everybody. Here is the answer to the EKG Facebook stumping contest, I guess. And so far we had some good guesses, but the correct answer is atrial tachycardia. For those of you who came to the CE, what was it, 2 quarters ago, remembers that I like to pretend atrial tachycardia doesn't exist, mostly so we can stump people on Facebook. All right, so what makes this an atrial tachycardia? So remember, every time you look at an EKG, you go through a system. So firstly, you start off with a rate. So find a QRS complex that lands on a big line, 300, 150, 100. So we're somewhere in between 100 and 150, maybe 140 or so. So you've got the rate there. Then looking for rhythm, you're going to look for P waves. So as a lot of people pointed out, there are P waves here. If you look, they're spaced out evenly, and there is a gap between the P wave and the actual QRS complex, and that gap is not changing. So the PR interval is increased. Now, a lot of people said, well, this P wave is back here post the T wave, and so you could consider it to be a QRS TP, but in fact, what I think is actually happening here is the P is the very beginning, followed by a space, and then the QRS and the T, and then that cycle repeats itself. So what makes this an atrial tachycardia as opposed to a junctional tachycardia with a first-degree AV block, or a junctional tachycardia with retrograde P waves, etc.? So remember, when you're talking about a junctional tachycardia, what you're saying is that it's coming from the AV nodes. That's a heart, remember, this is the left, this is the right. You've got your AV node, bundle of His, and your bundle branches, and then your SA node. So if the impulse is originating in the junction, in the AV node, then you will start off with a QRS complex, that's correct. But then if you are to have a P wave, it should be hidden either within the QRS complex, immediately afterwards, inside the T wave, or maybe just before. But it shouldn't be this far late or this far early. So the question is, if it's not coming from the AV node, where else could it be coming from? Well, as old friend of ours, David Catula, mentioned, it is a supraventricular tachycardia because it is narrow. So we know that it is coming from above the ventricles. So the first question is it coming from the SA node? Well, if it was coming from the SA node, the P waves would look more normal. So you look in V1, the P waves are inverted, and then down in your lead 2, the P waves are inverted. So this is not coming from the SA node. So the question is, where is it coming from? The fact that it is a solitary P wave morphology that continues throughout the entire EKG means that it is coming from some other atrial foci. It could be coming from the left or right atria. A single spot has determined that it is now the pacemaker of the heart, and it takes a little longer than normal to reach the AV node, hence the actual elongation between that upside down P wave and the the QRS complex. So that's what makes it a atrial tachycardia. It is not multifocal, since it is only one type of P wave. It is a unifocal or focal or ectopic atrial tachycardia, and that is the actual EKG answer. Just to make a comment on some of the guesses that we got, specifically junctional tachycardia with a first-degree AV block. Remember, a first-degree AV block implies there is a block somewhere in the AV node or the His-Purkinje system. And that also implies that the impulses are coming from above that AV node and then are slowed down in this system. If it was a junctional tachycardia, there's no way for it to then also be slowed down in itself. And so it is an atrial tachycardia coming from somewhere else. A junctional tachycardia with a first-degree AV block is probably unlikely. What are the other guesses we got?
I can't remember.
All right, I think that was it.
All right.
Appreciate everyone. Until next time.